Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of the It's Coming podcast, a UCTV sports podcast following along the UConn men's basketball season. I'm going to be your host, Matt Goepfert, and I'm joined alongside me by my co-host, Noam Watt. Noam, how are you, and why don't you break down what we're going to be doing on this podcast?
Matt, I am absolutely fantastic. Earlier today, the news finally put out that UConn is going to be playing some basketball on Wednesday night against CCSU. First things first, though, the name. It's coming. A legendary press conference from the man himself, Dan Hurley, middle of January after a tough loss to Villanova. Let me clear my throat for this one. People better get us now. That's all. They better get us now because it's coming. When that happened, when Hurley said that, man, I needed a brick wall to run through. Get me fired up, Dan Hurley. Inject UConn basketball into my veins. We could not go anywhere else with the name of this podcast. What we'll be doing with this podcast is a weekly episode breaking down the latest and biggest news surrounding UConn men's basketball. We'll go over the games of the past week, have some segments to go along with them, as well as have brief previews of the games coming up, and hope to have some outside guests from news outlets around the conference, around college basketball, and even some fellow UCTV members. So without any further ado, episode 1 of the It's Coming podcast starts right now.
Kemba Walker, step back, Walker, cardiac Kemba! And the Huskies are the top dog in 2011. El Amin comes over and says, we shocked the world. Bounce, up ahead to Booknight to the rim, and a ball!
People better get us now. That's all. You better get us now, because it's coming.
And like you said, Noam, today when we're recording this podcast, UConn made it officially official that there will be games played against Central Connecticut State University on Wednesday and then against the University of Hartford on Friday. Now, these should be 2 gimme games, start off 2-0, clean record, but as we know, especially against St. Joe's last year, none of that's guaranteed. So, for the first time the Huskies are back on the court, Noam, what are you most looking forward to in these games?
Man, college basketball is back. It's going to be unique, though. The atmosphere of college basketball in empty arenas, it's going to be weird. You're going to hear, hopefully, fingers crossed, you're going to hear every single word that Dan Hurley says. You're going to hear what James Bouknight is saying when he's calling plays on offense. You're going to hear officials' calls. You're going to hear conversations between players on opposing teams. It's going to be neat. It sucks for us that we're not going to be there, in our third row seat on the right side next to the visiting bench at Gampel, going crazy, holding up signs, screaming. But I'll be tuned in. FS1, 8 p.m. It'll be cool. Hopefully my boy Johnny Fanta's on the call. But aside from just the atmosphere of the game, 6 new guys have never played a game for this UConn team. That doesn't include Dan Hurley's son, the walk-on, Andrew Hurley. And this is the first season in a long time where there's, a clear alpha on the team in James Bouknight. So I'm really excited to see what this team does. Obviously, 6 new guys, a bunch of good returners, and an alpha, a dog. James Bouknight, the man. He's going to be the man this year. We're going to see what he's up to, how he's improved his game this offseason. And man, I am excited for some UConn basketball. First time in over 8 months.
Yeah, and you know what you said about the atmosphere of the empty arena and hopefully being able to really hear Hurley and everything going on. And I really, really hope they don't pump in the fake crowd noise. I think it would just be a shame. It's a unique opportunity to be able to hear what's going on there. I think it's also going to be a little interesting how UConn, there's never going to be fans, but depending on where we play for a Big East away game, there could possibly be fans. Interested to see how that's going to affect the team. As far as the new guys, like you said, I can't wait to see the infusion of talent that's going to be brought in. With talent comes competition. That's been the storyline of practices ever since they got going. It only makes everyone better, and it's only going to make what you see on the court better. So without that, what are you going to see on the court? Noam, I want to hear your starting 5, not what you want the starting 5 to be, not what you want the starting 5 to be at the end of the season. What you think Dan Hurley is going to put out for the first tip of the season against CCSU?
All right, I'm going to break from the norm a little bit here. I'm going to go 3-guard lineup. Jalen Gaffney at the 1. RJ Cole at the 2, James Bouknight at the 3, Tyler Polley at the 4, and Isaiah Whaley at the 5. Now, a lot of people don't see Gaffney starting, but in my opinion, Hurley's going to start Jalen Gaffney because what he does not do is he does not turn the ball over. And if you slot Gaffney in at the 1, you get RJ Cole at the 2. He was a mid 30%, middle of 30% range 3-point shooter in his 2 seasons at Howard. That's pretty good. Get him off the ball, get him some open looks. He's going to knock him down. Move to the 3 slot, the small forward. James Bouknight is up 15 pounds from last season. And quite frankly, I don't really want the offense running through Bouknight as a point guard or even a shooting guard. I want him dominating off the ball. Come off a screen, take it to the hoop, dunk on somebody's face. Come off a screen, pump fake, dribble, alley-oop to Whaley. Boom. I want Bouknight dominating the middle of the floor, be the guy that's there, but doesn't need to touch the ball on every single possession. Now, Polley coming off the ACL injury, I think he's going to slot into the starting lineup at the start of the season just because Hurley knows what he's going to get there. He's a guy who can stretch the floor, open up space. And Whaley, that dude was a beast the end of last season. Double-double machine, just burst onto the scene. He's reliable. He's a senior. And both him and Polley, senior leaders, you're going to need this team to have those senior leaders come through. Now, that being said, my hope is that by the end of the season, you get Andre Jackson, Akok, and Adama Sanogo in the starting lineup alongside James Bouknight and RJ Cole. I think those are the best 5 players on UConn. But start of the season, Gaffney, Cole, Bouknight, Polley, and Whaley. How about you?
Yeah, I'd say definitely a little controversial take there with putting Gaffney at the 1. I don't dislike your lineup, but I wouldn't put Gaffney, I would not be giving him the keys to the offense, at least not just yet. For me, it's going to be RJ Cole at the 1, James Bouknight at the 2, the transfer Tyrese Martin at the 3, and then the same 4-5, Polley and Whaley. I just think RJ Cole has been so hyped up, especially since he's even just came here, and it just looks like it's his spot. It's his spot to take over. I like Bouknight at the 2, and then Tyrese Martin, look, Dan Hurley likes his veteran guys. He recruited him to URI when he was there, never actually got to coach him. Now he's a vet. I just don't see how Dan Hurley's not going to want a vet to start in the lineup out on the wing. Tyler Polley, like you said, he needs that catch and shoot presence out there, stretch the floor out. And Whaley, how has Isaiah Whaley not earned himself a starting lineup spot? I don't really love him at the 5 necessarily, but like you said, if Adama Sanogo wants to play the 5 later on in the season and start there, and Whaley could play the 4, I'd be very happy with that. But to start it off, I would have to agree, Whaley at the 5.
So we talk about starting lineups, and there's so many possibilities, which we'll get into later with the depth of this team. It really wouldn't surprise me if you see Brendan Adams starting at the 3, Tyrese Martin at the 4, and Isaiah Whaley at the 5. And that being said, I think that's because Polley still has to work his way back from an ACL injury, especially considering the 2-week hiatus the program just went through due to a COVID positive test. Now, Brendan Adams had a foot. Well, all the players have at least 2 feet, but the program likes to refer to it as having a foot. I take that as he had a foot injury. Earlier today, though, he tweeted he's all good to go. He's ready to go for the season. I really wouldn't be surprised if he slots in at the 3. That would obviously bump Gaffney out, so put RJ at the 1, Bouknight at the 2. Brendan had a good season last year. He's a junior. He's sort of come into his own. He's not a guy that dominates the ball, but he can play solid minutes. And it would just give a little bit more of a veteran presence, give Tyrese Martin a little bit more time to work into the rotation and into the UConn system. So let's move on to our breakout player. Matt, I'll let you go first for this. There's a lot of good candidates, a lot of newcomers, a lot of guys who sort of didn't get to shine as much as they could have last year, but you're going first.
Sure, I'll take Jalen Gaffney. Seems like a hot topic right now. The way he progressed through his first season reminds me of the progression Brendan Adams had from Brendan's freshman year to his sophomore year. Brendan Adams' freshman year, he was afraid to touch the basketball. He looked uncomfortable. He just looked afraid to be out on the court. He would get the ball and pass the ball. That was the huge thing we would always talk about. Get the ball, pass the ball. And then his sophomore year, like you just said, came into a bit of his own there. Kind of came a reliable guy that you could count on here and there. Could put up the 3 ball a little bit. So I really like Gaffney to do that. But now he's ready to take that next step. Because at the beginning of the year, Gaffney was barely scoring, barely doing anything. And then you really saw in the middle of the season, and I remember being at that Tulsa game, that overtime loss, when UConn was down 9, The lineup that came in was Brendan Adams, Jalen Gaffney, Sid Wilson, Akuk Cook, and James Bouknight. So you're going 4 guards, all right? And they brought it from Tulsa up 9 to UConn up 3. And I remember in that moment thinking, wow, Jalen Gaffney looks comfortable. Not only did he look comfortable, he played a great game, and from then he really progressed. So I'm super excited to see what he can do this upcoming season.
And Gaffney has also put on a lot of weight. He's a guy that's just been living in the weight room. He's up to 185 pounds this year. Shout out to new strength coach Mike Reffelt. That's a guy who was 175 pounds last year, but you can see it in his arms and you can see it in his physicality when he's on the court. And he's a guy that all the press conferences that we've had, the Zoom media availabilities, Hurley has just been raving about him. His teammates have been raving about him too. This is a guy who people sleep on his athleticism too. In high school, he was a human highlight reel. Kind of got overshadowed this year. I don't even know if he really threw down, a dunk, let alone a good dunk like Bouknight had dozens of. But for my breakout player, I'm going to go with Tyler Polley. Tore his ACL early January last season. His last game before that ACL injury, which occurred in practice, was against Tulane. It was a classic American Athletic Conference duel, 9 p.m. tip on a Wednesday at Gampel in front of, 2,200 fans. Anyways, Tyler Polley was juiced. He put up 19 points, 11 boards. Those are both his season highs. He also put on 10 pounds this season. And that's a theme we're going to see a lot of. This is a team that's bigger, they're tougher, they're more physical. And Polley working his way back from the ACL injury, I really expect him to play a more physical style of play, more of a true power forward style than your traditional catch and shoot guy. Now, that being said, he is the best pure catch and shooter on this team. Last season, the numbers weren't great, 34% from 3, but UConn fans will remember the Florida game. He hits the 3 to go up 32-29. The next play, a Cook block in transition, Polley from downtown Mansfield just buried it. The crowd went nuts. Polley was juiced out of his mind, and all he does is hit clutch threes. That's all the guy does. This season, I want him to take the next step. Hit those clutch threes, but also grab 8 boards a game, win a couple of extra offensive possessions, be more physical. I think Tyler Polley has a chance to be a breakout player, to really have a solid senior season. And you know what? I think that if he does that, he has a chance to play overseas because the guy can really shoot the lights out.
Yeah, it's really true what you said about Tyler Polley and what you'd like to see more out of him. He's not a guy you think of as a true, strong, down below power forward, always grabbing the boards. And that's a spot that he might have a little bit issues with if he can't do that. There are a lot of guys on this team that are very, very capable of doing that they brought in. Sonogo, Richie Springs is great on the boards. Javonte Brown, very raw, but he's supposed to be good on the boards as well. So that's something he's definitely going to have to turn up. Moving on, X Factor for this team this year. It can be a player, it can be a thing. What is your X Factor, Noam?
All right, I'm going with the obvious. Number 2, James Bouknight. The big question is, can he handle the pressure, the expectations? Dan Hurley said it time and time again that nobody's working harder in practice than Bouknight, but with practice, with responsibility comes expectations. Teams have been honing in on Bouknight all offseason long. He is the focal point of UConn's offense and their success. That being said, the success of the team does ride on the back of James Bouknight. Can he continue to put up numbers and efficiency numbers like he did at the end of last season, where he just dominated every game, scored in double figures in the last 12 or something? You can check John Rothstein's Twitter for that. He has a stat up almost every day. And James Bouknight, it's a guy who's got to be a leader out there. He's a sophomore, but likely this is his last season with UConn. If he plays well, he's got a chance at a lottery pick. But if he busts, I think UConn's season could very, very easily and scarily fall apart. It all rides on the back of James Bouknight.
It's interesting talking about James Bouknight, and John Fanta actually just recently mentioned it, and he talked about how coaches did not really pick Bouknight for Big East first team, and that was simply he hasn't played in the Big East a full season. He's going to be huge, obviously, but for me, my X factor, not a player, but it's going to be how is Dan Hurley going to handle this lineup and the minutes. That's something, we've been kind of critical of Dan Hurley the first 2 seasons of how he handles his lineup. Very, very scared to go and do something different sometimes, it seemed, especially last year. Altuve Gilbert struggled, and he kept him in the starting lineup for what seemed like just a few games too long. Now you got a lot of guys with a lot of talent, And a lot of them are Hurley guys, as we like to say. So it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to be able to handle all these guys that are competing in practice, that want these minutes, who he's going to be able to give them to, what lineups are going to work, when does he want to play 4 guards, when does he want to play 2 bigs, because you're going to now have a big front court. So that's going to be the X factor for me.
And I think the obvious X factor as well is just the health of the team. You know, they have more depth than last season where some games they would suit up 7 scholarship players. You know, heck, they had Temi shoot the shot for the game at Houston. Sorry, but he's a walk-on. You know, this is a guy who should never have seen the court, let alone shoot the ball in a crucial American Athletic Conference game against nationally ranked Houston. So the team's got to stay healthy. You know, they got good depth, but they got to stay away from COVID. They got to keep their masks on. They got to, you know, with an increase in weight and physicality, they got to make sure that they're not doing too much and pushing themselves too much so that they're getting a nagging, you know, quad strain or an ankle sprain that is going to hamper them for 2-3 weeks and make them not as capable as before that injury. So you got Dan Hurley, I got James Bouknight, and I think we all got the health of this team as well. So we're going to skip out to the depth of the Huskies now. Speaking of, you know, having 11, 12, 13 guys that can play. So what are you most looking forward to from the depth of this team?
The depth of this team, what I would most look forward to, is the ability to apply that constant pressure on defense, that full court press, that half court press, that half court, full court trap that Dan Hurley likes to roll out. We saw it especially last year, okay, a lot, pushing up, and it worked great. There were a lot of teams that were very rattled by it. It really helped out. But, like you said, as injuries happened, as less playable players were able to take the court, it kind of got diminished. And that's something that, truthfully, the only word I can think of, sucks. I loved it. You loved it. Especially at a home game, there's few things that get the crowd more into it than some relentless defense. So I am very much looking forward to what that's going to be able to bring for the Huskies.
One of the signature plays that showcased the Huskies' ability to do that last year was Jalen Gaffney stealing the ball at about midcourt against UCF. Took it from the right side, went up all the way under and around, left hand, scoop reverse layup, essentially, high off the backboard, SportsCenter top 10 play. You know, it was gorgeous. It showed us the athleticism Gaffney had, but really it came down to the Huskies' ability to use the full court and the half court trap to force turnovers. But for me, the depth means that Hurley has the ability to be selective. We just talked about, you know, some of the brutal players he had to play, quite frankly, because they were so short on scholarships. But you and I talked last night about the brutal starting lineups Hurley had to roll out due to injury in his first 2 years. You know, you had like Terrence Smith,
Terrence Smith started, man.
Yeah, you had Terrence Smith and Sid Wilson starting a game together. And at UConn, that should never happen. And this year, that's not happening anymore. You know, last year, he had to roll with Alterique Gilbert and with Josh Carlton for however many games because he didn't have anybody better. Whaley wasn't proven yet. Gaffney, like you said, whenever he touched the ball, he would play hot potato with it because he was scared of touching it. But that's not happening this year. He has the ability to be selective. If a guy is pooping his pants out there, he's not going to play. He better not play. You know, also comes with, you know, depth comes with the ability to tighten up the rotation. I've been very critical of Hurley in the past for his roster management, but, you know, hindsight's 2020. He didn't really have many tools at his disposal. Now he's got all the tools he could possibly imagine. Plus, with the Cook working his way back in slowly, we anticipate probably about the turn of the new year he'll be back. You know, I don't think that's the end of the world. It gives guys like, you know, Richie Springs and Javonte Brown a little bit of breathing room to try and establish themselves. Is one of those two guys going to win the role as the backup to the backup center? You know, when Whaley comes out and Carlton goes in, if Carlton's stinking but Whaley's not ready to go back in, who's he going to go to? Is he going to go to JB or is he going to go to Richie? Or is he going to go to neither of them because they both can't do anything? You know, we'll find out. But when a Cook comes back, he's going to have extra depth. He's going to have great ability to tighten up the rotation. It's just going to be, you know, so many tools at his disposal. Now we want to switch gears to the player we're most excited about. There's a lot of them to choose from. RJ, Tyrese, Richie Springs. Well, nobody's picking Richie Springs, let's be honest. Damas Nogo, Javonte Brown, Andre Jackson. Player I am most excited about personally is Andre Jackson. You know, his nickname, well, my nickname for him is Overtime Andre. He's a human dunk show. I think he could be raw at first. I think that's something that people need to temper their expectations a little bit. John Fanta is not tempering his expectations. He just said he thinks he could be a lottery pick, which to me is a little bit cap. But by the time Big East play rolls around in the turn of the new year or two, I think Andre is going to be just downright explosive. He's going to break some rims. He's going to have Lob City going left and right. And we put up a poll on our UCTV Sports Instagram a couple months ago about who was the better dunker, whether it's Andre Jackson or James Bouknight. And Andre won in a landslide, which, considering Bouknight's ridiculous alley-oop last year at ECU, a little surprising. So Andre Jackson, for me, got to be the player I'm most excited about, sheerly because of his pure talent.
Hey man, maybe not a lottery pick this year, but hey, if he wants to play with us for 2 years and then do a lottery, I'm more than happy with that. But for me, new player I'm most excited about, the other obvious pick here would probably be Adama Sanogo. I raved about him with now UCTV alum Jake Ferrari when he first committed to UConn. But I'm going to go with something a little different. I'm going to take RJ Cole, okay? At Howard, he averaged 22 points, 6 assists, and shot 37% from 3. That is going to be something with Christian Vital leaving that they are going to need to replace. So I'm excited to see him just be able to score the basketball and dish it well as well. Also, Hurley has just talked so highly of him ever since getting him, and kind of for a while now, the consensus was that he is going to be the starting point guard since Vital left. That's a lot of pressure on a kid like that, for he hasn't even touched the actual court yet, just as a redshirt. Speaking of him being a redshirt, we saw what a redshirt year did for a Cook, and that wasn't even a full year. That was 1 semester of being a redshirt. And he was the most ready, as Hurley liked to say, out of his class. So what excites me is what can RJ Cole do coming in off a full year of being a redshirt. And then the cherry on top is that RJ Cole played high school ball for Bob Hurley Sr., so he already knows what playing for a Hurley is like, what the expectations are like, and I'm just excited to see what that's going to be like.
I think RJ is going to be Mr. Consistent for this team. He's going to score the ball. He's going to dish out assists left and right. Personally, I don't think he's going to be as razzle-dazzle as people expect. Obviously, the level of competition at Howard is a little lower, but he's going to be Mr. Reliable. He's probably going to be here for at least 1 more year after this as well. He's going to be that point guard that you want, leading your team to Sweet 16 berths, to Big East championship berths. But personally, I think Andre is going to be a little bit more exciting than RJ.
Not saying he won't, but I still think RJ will be pretty exciting. And with that, speaking of going to the Big East tournament, there is high expectations for this team this year. This is year 3 under the Dan Hurley era. Year 3 has kind of been penciled in as the year that this team really does something. They were selected to finish 4th in the coach's Big East poll. What is different about this team? What do you like most about them going into this season?
What I like most about this season is that UConn's ready for it. They got a confidence, a swagger, an excitement, a sense of who they are, more so than in years past. This team knows their roles. They know James Bouknight is the alpha. They know RJ Cole is going to be a point guard that's steady and reliable. They know Isaiah Whaley is going to put up 12 points and 9 rebounds every single game. And that's going to bode well for them. It's going to be a different season with COVID, with no fans, with a lot of challenges, with definitely some postponements along the way. But I think that UConn is ready for it. 4th in the Big East, it seems doable. It's a strong conference, but the Huskies, quite frankly, they're a strong team. I think that if they finish 3rd, it'll be, a pleasant surprise. But anything below 4th, I quite frankly think in year 3 of the Dan Hurley era would be a disappointment.
Yeah, and what I like most about this team coming in is that they have learned what it takes to win a game. Last year, you had some excruciating losses. You had a stretch where you lost the game to Villanova, you lost that game to Houston, you lost that game to Wichita, you lost that game to Tulsa. I have those out of order, but I believe it's those 4 that they lost all in a row. That is brutal. That is almost the epitome of brutality, okay? As John Rothstein likes to say. It's not quite, but it almost is. And sometimes the best thing for a team to win is to lose and experience what it is losing. And now they learn to win that second half of the season. They're going to be ready to win. let me give you something that shows their progress. They had a 3-year contract with Villanova, right? Take it back 3 years ago, they got blown out. Take it back 2 years ago, they got blown out a little less. Take it back last year at Nova, and it was a nail biter. You're up a few with a few minutes left, and just some bad turnovers, and you can't finish out the game causes a heart-crushing, soul-crushing loss. So I mean, but you see that progress, and now they're ready. And another big thing is that now 3 out of the 4 of these classes are, quote, Hurley guys, where he actually recruited them and brought them in. And the seniors, you know what? They've bought in now because they've had 2 years under him. They're not in their first year where they're like, oh, well, this new guy's coming in and whatever. They've been with him. They've stuck it out. They're ready to win.
Hurley talked a lot about those excruciating losses last year. You know, I think he said that in probably half of his press conferences. This year, there's going to be a lot fewer of those excruciating losses. Those games against Xavier, against Indiana, Villanova, Wichita, the list goes on. Those games are going to be wins this year. And that gets me juiced up. Now, speaking of juice, we're going to get to our first official segment of the week. It's called the Hurley Juice Moment of the Week, where we pick out our favorite quotable moment from the head coach during the past week.
Bouknight's been, he's like foaming at the mouth right now to get out there. We've tried to kind of settle him down because he's going like 110 miles per hour.
And there it is from Dan Hurley himself. Thanks for listening, everyone. As the weeks go on, we'll have more segments, and like we said before, hopefully some outside guests and some fellow UCTV members to talk some UConn basketball with us. Thanks for listening to the It's Coming podcast. See you next week.